All right, welcome to a new deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today we're digging into some analysis focusing on a pretty specific bit of med tech.
That's right.
Our source is cognitive market research, and we're looking squarely at the global market for video lower GI scopes.
Yep.
So the mission, as always, is to quickly pull out the key insights from this data, give you a shortcut to understanding this, well, pretty important healthcare market. We're looking at 2021 right through to 2033.
And, understanding these markets is really key. It tells you a lot about how tech gets adopted in healthcare,
Right.
about access to diagnostic tools around the world, and even about the sort of economic trends underpinning it all. This analysis gives us that detailed forecast, country by country, region by region.
Okay, let's hit those headline global numbers straight away. They really frame the scale here.
Go for it.
So back in 2021, the global market was valued at around $1.96 billion.
Nearly $2 billion, yeah.
Exactly. Fast forward just to 2025, and it's projected to cross the $2.5 billion mark, about $2.55 billion.
Okay.
And then looking out to 2033, the forecast puts the market at over $4.29 billion.
Wow. Okay. So quite a jump. That works out to a compound annual growth rate of 6.75% over that whole period.
6.75%.
Yeah. And what that really signals is, well, just solid, consistent global demand for these kinds of devices. It's sustained growth over the next decade or so.
Okay, so that's the global view. Pretty strong. But where is this growth actually happening? Let's start breaking it down by region. That's where it gets interesting.
Definitely.
Let's start with North America. It was the biggest market in 2021, right?
That's right, yeah. Held a really significant share. It was valued at $642 million in 2021.
$642 million.
And the forecast sees that growing to about $816 million by 2025 and then climbing up to $1.34 billion by 2033.
Okay, and within North America, I assume the U.S. is the main story.
Oh, absolutely. Clearly the dominant player. Its specific market size was over $500 million in 2021 alone.
Wow.
Projected to grow to over $1.15 billion by 2033.
And Canada.
Canada shows steady growth, but, smaller numbers. It goes from roughly $25 million in 2021 up to nearly $59 million by 2033.
Okay.
But, what's quite notable in the North American figures is Mexico's growth trajectory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it starts from a smaller base, naturally, around $16.7 million in 2021.
Okay.
But the analysis sees it hitting over $77.5 million by 2033. That's a really significant jump, proportionally speaking, suggests maybe expanding access or, shifting healthcare priorities there.
Interesting. So you've got the U.S. powerhouse, steady Canada, and then this really accelerating growth in Mexico.
Exactly.
Okay, fascinating. Let's hop across the Atlantic. Europe, what's the story there according to the source?
Europe's another really big region, of course. Total market value was $514.4 million back in 2021.
Okay, a bit smaller than North America then.
A bit smaller, yeah. Projected to grow to $650 million by 2025 and then reach over $1 billion, specifically $1.06 billion by 2033.
And who are the leaders in Europe?
Well, the source highlights Germany, France, and the UK. Germany's out front, expected to grow from $93 million to over $174 million by 2033. France and the UK are pretty close behind and quite similar to each other, actually. Both started around that $71-72 million mark in 2021.
Right.
And they're both heading towards the $131 million range by 2033.
Got it. And there were other significant countries mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. Italy, Russia, Spain all show solid growth. Italy, for instance, is projected to nearly double its market size. It goes from about $57.6 million to over $101 million.
Okay.
Russia from $50 million to about $87 million. Spain, $45 million up to $77 million. So, consistent expansion.
And there's another group mentioned, Sweden, Denmark.
Right. A few others detailed with, let's say, more moderate growth, but still positive. Sweden goes from about $41 million to $67 million. Denmark from $26.7 million up to $38 million. Switzerland, similar, $26.7 million to about $40 million. And Luxembourg, $26.7 million up to $37 million.
Okay, so steady growth across the board there. But then there's this rest of Europe category. The analysis calls its growth explosive.
Yeah, that really jumps out. It starts from a tiny base. Just $1.5 million in 2021.
Wow.
And it's projected to rocket up to $173.5 million by 2033.
That's incredible. What does that signify?
Well, that kind of leap in a collective category like that, it strongly suggests this tech is really pushing into previously smaller or underserved markets across the continent. Wider adoption, basically.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift focus again. Asia Pacific. The report calls this another really robust market.
Absolutely. Started at $540 million in 2021.
So bigger than Europe initially.
Just about, yeah. And it's projected to more than double, hitting over $1.12 billion by 2033.
Okay, and the key players driving that in APAC.
Well, China's the big one in the region, expected to grow from $161.5 million in 2021 to over $376.5 million by 2033. Japan and India are also showing really substantial market sizes and strong growth. Japan's projected to nearly double its market value, from $94 million to $181 million. And India's pretty similar, almost doubling too, from $78 million to $148 million over that period.
Okay, and the analysis goes into more detail for other APAC countries too.
It does, yeah. South Korea, Australia, Singapore, Southeast Asia as a group, and Taiwan. They all show positive trends. South Korea, for example, goes from about $50 million to $90 million.
Gotcha. Australia, about $41 million to $70 million. Singapore, $27 million to $42 million. Southeast Asia, $30 million up to $49 million. Taiwan, $23 million up to nearly $35 million. And there's the rest of APAC, too.
Yep. That category also shows growth from about $24 million to over $50 million. So broad expansion across the region.
I'm moving on. Let's look south. South America, smaller piece of the pie, I imagine.
Yeah, smaller overall, but still showing consistent growth. It's projected to increase from $141 million in 2021 to $240 million by 2033.
And the breakdown there. Brazil's usually the largest market.
That's right. Brazil goes from around $61 million to just over $100 million by 2033.
Okay.
Then you've got Argentina, $14 million to $29 million. Colombia, $23 million to about $36 million. Peru is smaller, $6.5 million to $9.7 million. And Chile, about $8.7 million up to $11 million.
And again, a rest of South America.
Yep, and that shows a decent jump, too, proportionally.
Right. From
$7.3 million up to over $29 million.
Okay. Next up, the Middle East.
Right. The Middle East market shows pretty stable growth forecasted. It's expected to increase from about $112 million in 2021 to $176 million by 2033.
And the key countries listed there.
Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the UAE are the largest. Saudi Arabia goes from roughly $33 million to $49 million. Turkey, $30 million to nearly $45 million. UAE, $23 million up to about $34 million.
Okay. Egypt and Qatar are smaller.
Yeah, Egypt from $13 million to $19 million, Qatar from $9 million to almost $12 million. And similar to other regions, that rest in the Middle East category shows a significant proportional surge.
Let me guess. Small base, big jump.
Exactly. From $2.6 million up to over $17.6 million projected by 2033.
Interesting pattern. Okay, finally, Africa. The source used the phrase remarkable growth here.
It did, and yeah, looking at the numbers, you can see why. It's starting from the smallest regional base, just $13.7 million in 2021.
Tiny, globally speaking.
Right, but the projection, it's forecast to explode to over $365 million by 2033.
Wow, that is remarkable. Where is that coming from?
Well, the analysis points to two main drivers. Nigeria is projected for just a massive leap from $7.1 million in 2021 to a staggering $183.8 million by 2033.
Goodness.
And South Africa also sees huge growth, projected from $4.7 million to over $121 million.
Incredible numbers. And the rest of Africa.
Similar story described as impressive growth. That segment goes from $1.8 million to over $60 million.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. Synthesizing these regional bits.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway?
Well, I mean, what really stands out is that the global market isn't just growing, it's growing differently everywhere. You've got your sort of established, mature markets like the US, Germany, UK, showing solid, consistent growth.
Right, the bedrock.
Exactly. Then you have these large expanding markets, especially in Asia Pacific. Think China, India, driven by, economic development, more healthcare investment.
Makes sense.
But maybe the most striking part of the story is that rapid acceleration, even if it's from a smaller start, in places like Africa, Mexico, and all those rest of categories we saw.
Yeah, those jumps were pretty dramatic.
They really suggest widening access and adoption of this technology in, emerging markets and previously less served areas.
So it really paints a picture, doesn't it? This specific medical tech becoming much more common globally across really different economic landscapes. So, okay, bringing it back to you listening.
Right.
Why should you count out these numbers?
Well,
this analysis gives you a kind of tangible view of how healthcare tech adoption is playing out worldwide. It flags the key markets driving future growth and maybe, just maybe, reflects changing health priorities or just better access to diagnostics in places they weren't common before.
Exactly. And maybe just one final thought to chew on, based only on this data we've looked at.
Go on.
Given those really dramatic growth rates we saw projected for regions like Africa and Mexico, and those combined rest of Europe, rest of South America, rest of the Middle East buckets, what might that tell us, about potentially shifting global healthcare investment or maybe an increasing focus on diagnostics and preventative care in emerging economies around the world?
That is something to think about. Food for thought.
Definitely.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the global video lower GI scopes market using the analysis from cognitive market research.
My pleasure.
We hope this gave you some useful perspective on these trends. See you next time. Okay, welcome to the deep dive. You've brought in some really interesting source material today. Looks like from cognitive market research, among others.
That's right.
And we're diving into the market for video lower GI scopes.
Absolutely.
So we're going to try and unpack what's shaping this, pretty critical bit of healthcare tech.
Yeah, exactly. It's about understanding the tech, sure, but also the forces behind it, the drivers, the challenges, what's coming next.
More than just the gadgets themselves. It's about people, access, all that stuff.
Absolutely. So our mission here is really to pull out the key insights from these sources, give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this whole area.
Sounds good. Okay, let's unpack this then. Where should we start? Maybe with what's actually driving demand for these scopes. Why now?
Well, the biggest thing really is the rise in GI conditions globally. We're talking things like colorectal cancer, IBD, inflammatory bowel diseases.
Right, and those are becoming more common.
Yeah, sadly they are.
Yeah.
And as they increase, the need for good diagnostic tools like video colonoscopy for early detection just shoots up.
Makes sense. And I guess the technology itself isn't standing still either.
Oh, definitely not. That's a huge catalyst. The scopes are getting better, more flexible, much clearer HD images, special light techniques like narrowband imaging.
What does that do, the narrow band?
It basically helps doctors see subtle changes in the tissue lining, things they might otherwise miss. So these aren't just small tweaks. They make diagnosis more accurate, procedures maybe a bit quicker.
So better tech drives adoption.
Got it. And there's a people element too, right? Demographic?
Precisely. The world's population is aging. Simple as that.
Uh-huh.
More people hitting the age where regular screenings, like colonoscopies, are recommended. Plus, you've got more government screening programs kicking off.
So bigger pool of potential patients needing these checks.
Exactly. It all adds up. Rising need, better tech, and, well, more older people.
Okay, so that paints a picture of pretty strong growth drivers. But there have to be roadblocks too, right? What holds things back?
Yeah, the sources are clear on this. The biggest hurdle, cost. Plain and simple. These things aren't cheap, I take it.
Not at all. The initial price tag for the equipment, plus keeping it maintained, cleaning it properly, it's a major expense. Especially tough for, smaller hospitals or clinics in areas with less funding.
And it's not just the machine cost, is it? You need people to operate them.
Absolutely critical point. There's a shortage of trained specialists, gastroenterologists, endoscopy techs, pretty much everywhere.
So demand for procedures is outstripping the number of skilled people.
That's the situation, yeah. It limits how many procedures can be done, creates waiting lists, particularly in underserved regions.
And then there's the patient perspective, too. Not everyone's eager for these procedures.
That's right. Patient reluctance may be due to discomfort, embarrassment, cultural factors. It's a real thing. It definitely impacts screening uptake.
So cost, staffing, patient hesitancy. Quite a few challenges there. But okay, despite those headwinds, the sources mention some really interesting trends emerging. This is where it gets exciting, maybe. What should we be watching?
Well, one of the big ones is AI, artificial intelligence.
AI in endoscopy. How does that work?
It's starting to be used in real time during the procedure. The AI can help the doctor spot polyps, maybe even classify them.
Wow. Okay, like a second pair of eyes?
Kind of, yeah. The hope is it boosts accuracy, makes things more efficient, maybe even helps with those staffing pressures eventually.
Interesting. And where these procedures are done, that's changing too.
Yes, there's a definite shift towards what they call ambulatory endoscopy centers, basically dedicated outpatient clinics.
Ah, so not always in a big hospital setting.
Exactly. It's a big trend in North America, parts of Asia too, and that drives demand for different kinds of scopes, sometimes maybe more portable or designed for faster turnaround. Convenience and efficiency are key there.
And you mentioned something, sustainability. How does that fit with medical scopes?
It might seem a bit surprising, but yeah, manufacturers are focusing more on it. You see developments in both advanced reusable scopes and sterile single-use
Single
ones.
use.
Yeah. The idea is partly about hygiene, reducing any risk of cross-contamination, especially with complex scope designs. But it's also about cutting down on the chemicals, water, and energy used for reprocessing the reusable ones. It's a complex balance.
Fascinating. Okay, so pulling all this together, what's the main takeaway from this deep dive?
I'd say the core story is this. You've got powerful forces pushing this market forward, real health needs, amazing tech advances, demographic shifts. But at the same time, serious brakes are being applied by cost, staff shortages, and patient factors.
Right. And the trends like AI and shifting care settings
Yeah.
show the industry trying to innovate around those breaks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Trying to meet that growing need.
precisely.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, understanding this push and pull gives you a really valuable insight into a key part of modern medicine, how we diagnose and prevent serious illness.
And it leaves us with a really important question to think about, actually building on what's in the sources. With these high costs and staff shortages being such big issues, how do we make sure that all these exciting advances, the AI, the better imaging, actually reach everyone who needs them? For early detection, better outcomes, regardless of where they live or what they can afford. That access question feels critical.